Let's start with intuition. I think that's the biggest umbrella kind of concept. So intuition is a name for when we don't know how we came to a conclusion, we don't know how we know something, but we know it. So intuition includes things like unconscious processing of sensory information. Like a plane just flew overhead, and I might not have noticed that consciously, but unconsciously, I'm raising my voice so that I can be heard over the plane, right? So that's an unconscious sort of intuitive act. It's not as intuitive as we normally think of, which is where you actually become conscious of something that was previously unconscious. Precognition, which is an intuitive skill, so it's under the umbrella of intuition, but it's specifically about picking up on information that sort of leaks back in time from the future. So it's the scientific name for this intuitive process of actually getting information that's only obtainable from the future, that's not obtainable from anything we have here already or anything in the past. Anything in the present or the past doesn't help you, but it actually has to be from the future. So an intuition that's more like you wake up from a dream and you say to yourself, oh, my mother's gonna die. And your mother hasn't been sick, but all of a sudden you know she's going to die. That is more like precognition. Presentiment means pre-feeling. So it's you're not even conscious usually. It's doesn't have words. It's just a feeling that happens to you. Most people are not aware of it. But in the laboratory, we can see that before something positive happens, like you see a picture of a cute little baby on the computer screen, versus before something negative happens, like you see an image of a person pointing a gun at you on the computer screen. These aren't real. That's not a real baby. That's not a real gun. But we react to them still positively and negatively. The thing is, we react after we see the images with our bodies. We get more aroused. We get maybe scared of the gun or excited about the baby. But we also react beforehand, almost like it's a symmetry or a mirror in time. So we're reacting beforehand, not as much as after, but there's still some reaction. And that reaction beforehand actually can't be predicted in our usual means. We can't, if the experiment is done correctly, when a random number generator is used to determine which of these kinds of pictures will be shown to the person who's in the experiment, we cannot use any means that we're aware of to predict the response, but the human body can actually the human body seems to be able to, on average, predict the response. And that's the mystery of presentiment. One of the side effects of studying these phenomena as a scientist is you start to become a little bit of an expert on the culture of science and the history of science, because you're studying an area that many other scientists don't believe exists. So they think that you're just not thinking properly, you're not doing your experiment properly, you're not analyzing it properly, or you're just asking bad questions. And so they think that, and you have to deal with that. You have to understand why they're thinking that. You have to understand what the taboo is. And I've come to understand that the taboo is, you can't say that cause comes after an effect. You have to always say that cause comes before an effect. Now, I don't agree with this. I think there's evidence that cause can come after effect. But the taboo says you can't say that. So one of the ways to deal with the taboo is to make up new words that make people think that they know what you're talking about, even though you're actually smuggling something under the radar, or you're using a Trojan horse or whatever. So the smuggling words are these euphemisms. So I coined the term predictive anticipatory activity to say it's predictive, it's predicting the future. It anticipates correctly, on average, what's going to happen, and it's an activity in your physiology. So it says the words without making people scared. So I wanted to do two things at one time. I wanted to ask the question, okay, we all know that we can't predict the future, but I want to prove that it's hard to predict the future consciously. At the same time as I'm asking people to predict the future consciously, I'm measuring their physiology. And so at the time of the experiment, I was measuring skin conductance, so changes in how much you're sweating. So when you sweat more, your skin increases in conductance, more electricity can flow through it. That's why you shouldn't, be in bare feet and stand in a pool of water next to an electrical outlet. You don't want to get shocked. So I was looking over the entire experiment, just recording someone's skin conductance. And what skin conductance is associated with arousal. So you sweat a little bit more when you're excited, right? So if we have an experience of something good happening, for instance, in this task, if we have the experience of being correct about our guess for the future, boom, the arousal goes up after we find out that we're correct. And we know that, and that's been known for decades, right? But what I did with the people who came into the lab is I said, I'll hook you up with the skin conductance, and then I want you to do something crazy. I'm going to show you 4 images, and I want you to take all the time you need, and I want you to pick the one, press your mouse button on the one that you think is going to be the target image. And they say, what do you mean the target image? And I say, the one in the future. The one in the future that you can't possibly predict. I want you to try to predict it anyway. Which one do you think is going to be the target? And then they got into it and they said, okay, great, I'm going to do this. So they started doing it, and however long they took, they just decided between 4 images, and then a random number generator would choose one of the images. So they were either right or wrong. And if they were wrong, they got a little upset, even though they knew it was crazy, right? Or they thought it was crazy. And if they were right, they got excited. And so what you can do is then take the trace from the skin conductance over time before each of these images, correct, incorrect, correct, incorrect, and you can put together all the ones that are correct, like the 10 seconds before, and the 10 seconds before all the ones that are incorrect, and you can compare them. And what you see is that there's this difference, and the difference is especially clear in men. They get especially excited when they're correct about the guessing task, and especially kind of depressed when they're not correct. And that's true after, and that's true before. So before anyone on the planet knows what this image is and whether they're correct or not, their physiology is telling you that they're going to be either correct or incorrect. So they somehow know. They don't know consciously, but their bodies know. Now women are kind of a more complicated case. We are kind of confused, I guess, on average about if it's a good thing to be correct or not. And so so our physiology tells that same tale, and you see that same confusion before and after, actually. When people say, well, that's coincidence, of course that will happen, you say, well, that's why we invented statistics. So that's why we do the experiment in the lab instead of just asking people, can you predict the future with your body? So what we can do is actually look at the statistics of the physiology traces, and we can compare what would happen by chance to what happens in the experiment. And you can also do that over and over again. And in fact, I worked with Patrizio Trasoldi at University of Padova in Italy, and I worked with Jessica Utz at University of California, Irvine, to do a meta-analysis, which is to combine a bunch of studies that did this to see, okay, 1 study maybe, 2 studies maybe, 26 studies, together it looks like this is actually happening. And then that same kind of meta-analysis was repeated a few years later with the same result. This effect seems to be real. And it's very interesting. We don't understand it. We have ideas, but we don't understand it. It's almost as if the future is pulling us forward a little bit. We're being pushed by the past and pulled by the future at the same time. I do not. I have an idea. I have an idea, which is that, on the quantum level, we have quantum retrocausal experiments. So experiments have been done in quantum mechanics where you can see that it looks like a cause that occurs in the future produces an effect or an influence in the past. In that situation, cause and effect are very confusing because oftentimes we define cause as coming first. And so what we can say is there's a very high correlation between something that happens in the future and something that happens in the past. And so then the question is presentiment an extension of a quantum mechanical system in our bodies and brains? We are definitely quantum mechanical systems in the sense that we all contain atoms, we all contain electrons, we all contain photons. And so the rules of quantum mechanics, to some extent, should also apply to the system, at least within the time frame of quantum mechanics. And I've seen longer time frame effects on the order of seconds to minutes, which is the time frame that we need to explain presentiment. So that's one explanation. So precognitive remote viewing is something that was investigated for decades by the intelligence community in the United States. And in 1995, they shut down that program. But one of the findings from the scientists who were hired to investigate the program was that precognition was the most supported, statistically, was the most supported effect that they found. The whole program wasn't about precognition, but the part that was most supported scientifically was precognition. And that was in 1995. And since then, over and over again, people have published studies showing that precognitive remote viewing works. What is precognitive remote viewing? It is sitting down or standing up. Most people sit down because they're going to write. And making the intention to put your mind in a kind of an altered state, but not too altered, where you can receive information about a future target. So what is a target? In the case of intelligence work, a target might be, anything that we need to know about this particular country in the next day, right? If you're doing a missing persons case, a target might be where is the location of the person when they are going to be found. And if you're doing a stock market trade, will this stock go up and down, up or down, or up and down sometimes. The key to all of these is the best performance seems to be when the person who's doing this, they call them the viewer, the precognitive remote viewer, doesn't know anything at all about the target. Maybe it knows that it's a stock, or maybe it knows that this is a missing maybe they know it's a stock, or maybe they know this is a missing person, but that's it. So you don't know the gender, you don't know the age, or you don't know the stock type, or you don't know the country. Because our conscious minds like to make up stories about things and not listen to what's coming from the unconscious. So as soon as someone says the country is Russia, now you have a whole story. Oh, you're interested in the Ukraine thing, da-da-da-da-da-da, right? Or whatever's going on at the time. Without that, what happens is the remote viewer just gets some numbers, 29341848, okay? And they're told, they might be told this is a country, please let us know if there's anything going on. And then they have to go and describe the target. And the way, as an analyst who looks at that remote viewing session, or transcript as you call it, you have to look and see, are there any indications that this person was able to tap into the target? And that's very helpful because first you look to see, if it is Russia, did they describe something that seemed like Russia? If so, okay, good, now they're on the right track. Then you might listen to their advice. If they didn't describe something that looked like Russia, then you can ignore their advice because they're not on track with the target. So what you do is you say, I'd like you to dream, I'm going to show you a video tomorrow. I want you to try to dream about it tonight. And then the next morning, you say to them, would you write down all of your dreams, every single dream you had? And then you say, okay, are you sure those are all the dreams? And if they say yes, you say, great. You take their paper and you give it to a friend. So neither of you can touch it. That's the final copy of their dreams. Now you use a random number generator that will randomly choose from, let's say, 20 videos you have, one video, and then you choose the video and you say, this is our target, this is the one that you were supposed to dream about last night, I'll show it to you. And then you show it to them. And it's usually like dancing or some kind of interesting video or like an avalanche or something kind of dramatic. So after you show them the video, then you can either be done and have a one trial process, which is what I like to do, and then you have another dreamer come in and you do the same. And you can do statistics on, what you can do statistics on is what independent judges who don't know anything about the experiment and don't know what the targets are at all, what they say is the relationship between what the person wrote, this is my dream, this is what happened, I saw a fish, blah, 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 it jumped out of my head, or whatever it was. And like you give them 4 targets and you don't tell them which was the actual target. And you send it via email so they can't see your face, so you're not giving anything away, you know? So you send them an email and you say, here are the 4 targets, tell me which one of these targets is most like this dream report. And so you do that again and again and again, and you get the ratings, and you can do statistics. You know, obviously the chance with 4 targets is 1 in 4. So, but the effects when people are skilled precognitive dreamers are usually more like 40% or 30% rather than 25%. It's not a lot, but it's enough statistically that sometimes they turn out statistically significant. But precognitive dreaming is very hard so far to capture in the lab. Yeah, precognitive dreaming is relatively difficult to capture in the lab. So with precognition, I think there's two aspects to the training that works. One aspect is like giving people permission to be precognitive, and that's a lot of it. Just making a space where they can feel psychologically safe being precognitive. So it's a kind of an unmasking of something that's already there. And the other piece is enforcing practice, 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 practice. And so when people argue about whether precognition can be trained or not, I think you have to ask, what is the definition of training? If you mean that they have no capacity at all and you give them the capacity, I would say no. It's that I think everyone has this capacity unconsciously, and what you're doing is unmasking it and helping people practice it, then I think yes. Remember, it's a lot like music. So there are people who are born gifted, right? And so I don't think you can train someone who wasn't born gifted in music how to be gifted in music. I don't think you can. I think you can train someone who wasn't born gifted in music to be a better musician, right? And they're never going to be maybe a concert pianist or be a composer, but maybe they just want to get better at being a musician. So it's you're working always with the natural talent, and then you're working on how to shape that and hone that. So both of those things are important. We have known for decades that if you show someone a picture of a happy dog and you ask them to say, is this happy or sad? They will click on the happy button with a certain amount of time. Okay, it will take them about 500 milliseconds to say, oh, that's happy, right? Half a second. If you show them a picture of a happy dog and just before it, you showed them a picture of the word sad, and you tell them, ignore the words. I'm going to show you some words and some pictures. Ignore the words, just respond to the pictures. Still, if you show sad and then the happy dog, it takes them longer to say happy to the dog. They'll say that the dog is happy, but it's a little bit confusing because you just saw the word sad. So if you just saw the word happy, very fast, because it matches the dog, right? So that's called forward priming. And it's decades old, and it's very robust effect in psychology. What Daryl Bem did was say, let's just run it backwards in time. So we're going to show a picture of the happy dog, ask people to say, is it happy or sad? And then afterwards, we're going to flash a word, either happy or sad. It either matches the picture or it doesn't. And you do this over and over again with different pictures and different adjectives. And what we find in the reverse direction, what he found was the same effect as in the forward direction. You're faster when the word that you haven't seen yet, you're faster at pressing the button before you're about to see a word that matches the picture you just saw. It's confusing.